Hi, my name is Alistair Hirst, and I have been in the game industry for the last 30 years, so a long, long time. So things have changed a lot since the early days. So I'm really happy to see what you kids are up to, because you're well ahead of where I was at your age. Basically, my journey started way back when. I've specialized in the game industry in the audio section. So I specialized, I was an audio director for most of my career in the game industry. And I've done, music, sound effects, audio programming, and then an audio director position, which is the person that manages the whole audio team, and also what the sound of a game is going to be. So my journey started back when I was 6 years old, when I started playing the recorder and I played piano. And I started composing my own music pretty fast after that when I was 6. And I would actually spend more time composing my own stuff than practicing for my piano lessons. Then when I was 11, I moved to Canada, and because I didn't used to practice very much and used to compose, my parents decided that no, they weren't going to bring the piano anymore. So one of the regrets of my life is that I didn't practice piano or learn piano much after that until I went to college. When I got to 6th grade, I started playing trombone, so kept in with music. And then when I went to high school, I joined the concert band, the jazz band, the brass ensemble, did as much music as I could. During high school is when I started learning my first computer language, which back then was BASIC. So we had very old computers back then that we could learn how to start programming. And that was important because, like you guys are doing, you start to learn how to think like a computer thinks and be able to input what a computer needs to do what it does. So in 10th grade, I got a summer job where I went and I crushed rocks and I smashed bags of dirt for a company that was looking for gold up in northern Canada. So they're doing that. So with the money that I made from that job, I bought my first bass and started practicing how to play bass. When I was in 11th grade, I skipped French, and I instead used to go to the music room and taught myself how to play bass because I was more interested in that than French. And then during high school, I was in a band with my math teacher. We did a bunch of Beatles songs. And during that time, he advised me that being a professional musician was probably a bad idea, but I didn't listen to him. During that time also, I had access to a synthesizer lab in the music room. So I went and I started learning how synthesizers worked. And I started writing music there for various things, including various school projects. After I graduated in 12th grade, I went and spent a summer job in the Canadian Naval Reserve doing a lot of push-ups, which I didn't really want to do, but it allowed me to make the money so that I could then buy a bass amp. So I had a bass and a bass amp. And then later on, I became a lifeguard. And that's how I paid for my college, by doing that for the next 8 years. So for after high school, the first place I went to community college, and I went and got a music diploma. So I studied bass performance because I wanted to play, and I studied music, various theory of music, the history of music, that kind of thing. And then I joined a band, and my goal then was I wanted to be in a band touring. I wanted to record albums and write music, and in the band I played bass. I was the lead vocalist and I played synthesizers. But then as time went on, I became more interested in my new girlfriend than writing music. And it finally occurred to me that if I was ever to become successful as a recording artist, that I actually would spend a lot of my time on the road, away from my family, traveling and playing shows. And so I realized that isn't the life that I wanted for myself. So I went back to university and decided to become an engineer. I wasn't exactly sure at the time what kind of engineer. I thought, okay, maybe I'll design synthesizers. So maybe an electronic engineer, maybe a computer programmer, I don't know. So in college, I learned my second 2 languages. I learned the language, which is now an old language, called Pascal, and a very strange language called Forth, which we used for writing various kinds of music software. But at the same time, I took things like physics, and I decided I was going to learn everything I could about sound and music from as many different disciplines as I could. So I studied sound in physics, so I could understand, the equations that you could apply to how audio works. I took psychology classes in perception, so I could understand how humans hear, how we perceive what we are hearing, as much as I could about that psychology aspect of it. And in the meantime, taking on my prerequisites for engineering. So it was during that time that I kind of found that I wasn't very happy, and I kept finding myself wandering around the music department with all the artsy people, the artists and the filmmakers and the musicians and the dancers, and it was telling me that I wasn't in the right place. And then I took my calculus class, which just did me in, and I realized this is not for me. And so I ended up moving from engineering to a program called communication. And there was a professor, and this will come up a lot in your life. You need to look for these people. I took communication, and there was a professor called Barry Truax who was a big influence on me. He taught in the School of Communication, where I studied, once again, all about audio as it pertains to communication, how we receive information, how it's communicated, how sound affects us, all these kind of things. And then he also taught in the music department, in the computer music department. And so I started studying with him and learning all about computer music. So I learned the fundamentals of audio, right? I learned how digital audio works. I learned how to program computers to control audio. So I was building up all these fundamentals, which I'm very happy to see that you kids are doing right now, because the fundamentals that you're learning right now will continue right through your career if you keep doing this. So what you're doing is very important. Pay close attention, because everything you learn after this builds on top of these fundamentals. So that's what I did. I was learning all about audio. I was learning about computers. I went and I started working on all kinds of experimental music. And this turned out to be the perfect background for doing game audio, because it combined computers and technology and art and the creativity involved with it. And so I then went and I started scoring films for student films. So I got experience doing that. I studied Indonesian gamelan, which is the music from Indonesia. So I learned different styles of music from different parts of the world. I did summer intensives where I studied how film sound works and how that is all put together. And I studied under some Indonesian gamelan masters of how to play gamelan. So it was all about expanding my knowledge as much as I could. The other thing that I did then is I went to this reception once at the university, and this was really important. At this reception, at the time, I didn't play games. My parents wouldn't allow me to have a game machine at home. They thought it was a waste of time. Who knew, right? Anyway, I went to this reception, and someone at the reception said to me, where the next big thing is there's going to be games. And he gave me the name of somebody at Electronic Arts in Vancouver. And so I went and I took the audio director at Electronic Arts out for lunch a couple of times. And I was so new at this at the beginning, I even forgot that I needed to pay for lunch when you take someone out for lunch, and he kind of had to hint at me. So, these are things we learn. So I met with him a couple of times, and he pointed me to some people that were making a game. It was just two guys working in their basement, and they were making a game. And that was my first job after I graduated from college in actually working in the game field. And so I worked with them, and I created the sound and the music for my very first game. Was called The Games Winter Challenge, which was a game based on the Winter Olympics. It's just they couldn't get the license, so they weren't allowed to call it the Winter Olympics, which is why it was called The Games. So I worked on the Games Winter Challenge, and I worked on the Games Summer Challenge, and I worked on another game called Hardball 3, which was a baseball game. And I did these games for Sega Genesis and the PC. So one thing I want to point out here is that you know, people look at me and my successful career in games and they said I've been very lucky. But luck is what you create from it, right? You create opportunities, and then when the opportunity comes up, you need to make sure that you're prepared to take advantage of that by having the knowledge and everything that you need. So for example, I took that guy from EA out to lunch a few times. I went and I worked with this small company and I learned the tools. I learned how game audio gets made and how you put audio into a game. I gained experience. I worked on a few games that actually shipped. And that's when and how I got my big break, because the guy at EA, there came a time when all of a sudden they needed somebody quickly who could step into this special situation that had happened. And because I had learned the tools with that other company and I had taken him to lunch, he immediately went to me and he hired me, and I got to get onto this small job, which I did well at. And after that, I got hired full-time on at Electronic Arts. So that's how I got my way into the industry, by talking to people and making sure that when my opportunity came, that I had the knowledge to be able to do what I needed to do once I got in there. So once I got inside Electronic Arts, one of the first games I worked on was John Madden Football '93 on the Super Nintendo. So I did the sound and music for that, and I was the voice of the quarterback in that game. And then along there, a new console came along called the 3DO, which probably most of you haven't heard of, but it was the first console in North America that games shipped on a CD disc rather than cartridges. And so it was between me and another sound designer. Of one of us was going to go on to FIFA Soccer and one of us was going on to Need for Speed. They put me onto Need for Speed because I had experience doing audio programming. I was more technical, so I was better equipped to work with this new console, right? And so the other person ended up going on to FIFA Soccer, and you know, a brilliant composer, Jeff Dyke. He now has his own game company in Australia, and he did the game Unpacking, which is a big hit, and he's been learning programming now on his own too. He's been learning blueprints in Unreal. So while I was at Electronic Arts working mostly on the audio, I also went back to college at night and started taking more programming courses because I felt like I didn't know enough programming. And I wanted to have more control of that so I could put the sound into the game myself. So I went back and I learned my third programming language, C, and I also took assembly language, which is the very low level language, which you don't really need to know now unless you're a hardcore computer scientist. But for me, it was important because games at the time used that, and I wanted to understand what was going on down there under the hood. So so I was put on Need for Speed, and I started writing the audio code on that game because the audio director, he was actually starting his own company. He was hardly ever around, and then the only times he came into the office, he would spend about an hour or two playing piano, and then he would leave. So basically, I was doing all the work. And so when the time came, he actually left the company to go and keep working on his own company, and I stepped into that lead role. And at the time, they're like, "Oh no, who's going to do the audio programming for us now?" And I said, "Well, I will. I've been doing it the whole time." So I got to expand what I did. So I was doing the sound effects, I was doing the music, I was recording the cars, and now I also got the chance to be an audio programmer as well. So during that time, I got myself transferred down to a new studio here in Seattle, and I joined the EA Seattle studio, still working on Need for Speed. So during that time, I recorded a bunch of very expensive cars in Seattle. I flew to Europe and recorded cars in the UK and in Sardinia, which is part of Italy. I used to go to Las Vegas to record cars, and then recorded a lot of cars here in Seattle. So Need for Speed is now a $1 billion franchise. It's been a huge hit, and I was very lucky, the luck that I made for myself, to be able to be on that game and work on that game. And I worked on that game on the 3DO, and the PC, PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the Xbox. And with each new platform, I would push things to make things better. So as we got more memory and it got faster, I would figure out ways to make the sound of the cars better by building better models. So after 22 versions of Need for Speed, that was enough. I left Electronic Arts and I started my own company with another audio person at E8, and it was called Omni Audio. And we went and we formed a company that did audio for various games, including the programming if they wanted it. And so we worked with Microsoft. We worked on their hockey game for the Xbox, the NHL Rivals. We worked on Halo 2, which was a big one because they were crunching away and ran out of time. So we worked on all the cinematics for that. We worked on Guild Wars, many, many other games. So in terms of what it's like working on games, it can be a lot of fun, but it is a lot of hard work. You often have to work a lot of long hours, especially as you're coming in to the end of the game to get that game finished and to get it released on time. And so there can be a lot of stress and a lot of long hours, but at the same time, you are doing something creative, and every day it can be quite rewarding because you're coming up with something new and you have to solve all these problems, and you're trying to be as creative as you can to create the most fun game that you can. So after, so running that team, we got up to about the size of 8 people. And during that time, I learned how to run a business. I learned to improve all my leadership skills, which I'd also worked on when I was a lifeguard. I learned how to work with other companies and other teams, how to do marketing, negotiation, and networking, which is what I talked about at the top, was make sure you're getting out there and meeting with people and talking to people and getting to know people, because it's through that network that you eventually will find these jobs. So after the game business kind of collapsed in 2010, so we were looking around for some new things. So we started a little game company called Ton of Fun, and we built 2 iOS games, very simple games. One was just a little simple jumping game. Another one was based on flicking coins and doing curling or soccer or hockey, those kind of things. So we didn't make a lot of money that way. We got into it a little bit too late, but we did learn a lot for that. And then after that, I went and I joined Amazon Games in 2013. So I worked there for 6 years as an audio director, and did a bunch of different games there, including the last game I did called The Grand Tour, which was based on one of the Amazon TV shows. So that was very fun, and I got to work with some really talented people. So basically, games are a combination of art and technology, right? And there are a lot of different roles in the game industry for different types of people, right? So what you're learning now is the fundamentals, which is very important, and it's very important to understand the various aspects of the game. But once in the game industry, there are many, many different roles you can have. So for example, I've explained I worked on the audio part of things, right? And I've learned everything I can about audio, including the programming, but also how to manage teams. Then there are artists, right, who create all the art that goes into teams. And even within art, there are people that do the concept art, which is to imagine what the world or characters are going to look like. And then from there, modelers take those pictures and they build 3D models. And then there are people that are called riggers that put in all the points of where those things are going to move. And then there are people that skin them and create the art that wraps around those characters. And then there are, of course, all the programmers. There's very many different types of programmers. There's people that program physics. There are people who control the AI, all the non-playable characters of how those things work. And then there are people that manage teams, and then there are people that do marketing of games. Once the game comes out, they have to figure out how to get the word of the game out there. And so there's many, many different roles that are in the game industry, if you're interested, that can fit you as a person and what you're interested in. So to wrap up here, I would say the things that I've learned the most over my career of how to be successful, and this stuff applies to, I think, whatever job you're going to have, are these. Number one, You need to be curious about everything in the world, right? Including the people. Make sure you're talking to people and be interested in what they have. Be curious and want to learn about lots of different things in the world, because it can all feed into what you happen to do in the future in your life. You need to be open to mentors in your life, people in your life who can teach you things and help you and guide you. They can be really helpful. Another one is don't be arrogant. I've worked with people who come straight out of school and have been really arrogant, and they often fail. Realize that no matter what stage you are in your career, you can always learn something from anybody. So don't be arrogant, be humble, and realize that you always have more to learn. And then understand that deep knowledge comes from understanding something from multiple perspectives, which is, like I said, why I studied audio from all those different disciplines, psychology and physics and math, and then the creative aspects of music and sound design. And especially in today's world, you need to be a lifelong learner. I never stopped learning when I left college, right? I'm always learning. Even now, I'm still learning right now how to use the latest version of Unreal Engine so I can still build games. Learning the new version of Blueprints, which is very much like the Scratch, right? It's just a very much more advanced version of Scratch that people use to build big games. Learn to be a team player, which is what I'm really impressed to see that you people are doing, because games are made up of these huge teams if they're big games, or they can be small teams of 2 or 3 people, but you need to depend and get along with everyone on your team to be successful. So be a team player, don't backstab other people, always offer to help if you can, don't be a jerk. It's a small industry and word will get around if you're a jerk, and you won't get hired for new jobs. If you're a nice person that people want to work with, when you need a job or you need to go out there, you will get referred by them, which is how I built my game audio business, because a lot of people knew me. They knew I was a nice person. They wanted to hire me, and they knew that I would get the job done. Be reliable for your teammates. If you say you're going to do something, you make sure it gets done so that you're reliable, right? Build your network, make sure you're learning and talking to people and making lots of friendships along the way, because it's that network that's really important when you need to get a different job or move somewhere else, that you're going to depend on your network. And then finally, always push to be better. Every time you do something new, see what can I do this time to make this thing even better than before. And that's all I have to say about that.